Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Candice. Today we are going to continue on talking about Christmas. The last video I posted was on Santa and Elf on the Shelf. Just a whole thing. We're talking about these, of course, from a Christian perspective. Today we're going to talk about like the rest of the Christmas stuff, and we're going to look at what it actually says in the Bible and talk about some of the traditions that go along with this and whether these things ultimately are pleasing to God or not, or whether they actually have anything to do with God or not. Before we get started, of course, my nose is always itchy when I do these videos. I'm going to go ahead and pray, and then we're going to dive right in. God, thank you so much for sending your Son to save us, to be the ransom for the world, and to redeem all of us so we could spend eternity with you. Thank you for his birth and his death and his resurrection. I ask that you would give insight to anyone listening to this video, that something that I say would be new information for them, that you would open their eyes to whatever it is you want them to see and whatever it is you want them to do. I pray that you would take this video and it would be your words, not mine. Holy Spirit, take over. Because this is what's on your heart, Papa. This is what's on your heart. I ask these things in Jesus Christ's name. Okay. So we're going to start by saying that I'm talking specifically to Christians here. Okay. If you are pagan, atheist, whatever else, fill in the blank, you might learn something too. But I'm specifically directing this towards Christians, and we are going to talk about this from a biblical perspective. Goodness gracious, the itchy nose. That's how you know Holy Spirit's showing up. Let's start with the fact that Christmas, we claim it as Jesus' birthday, right? But it's not. The word Christmas is nowhere in the Bible to be found. The celebration of Christmas is nowhere in the Bible to be found. The annual celebration of any righteous person's birthday is nowhere to be found in the Bible. There are only two birthday celebrations in there, and they are both pagan kings who murder people. Not so fun. But, so the entire, idea that we're celebrating Jesus' birthday in and of itself is not biblical. Because nowhere did Jesus say, hey, remember and celebrate my birth every year. He says to remember his death and his resurrection, right? Because those are the biggest kind of important things in his life that he did. And he talks about, all of the miracles and things he did, and yet we focus on just the moment he entered into our world, which, a little weird, but hey. Jesus, in the Bible, it only has two accounts of his actual birth, right? In Matthew as well as in Luke. I will link all of the scriptures below so you can go check them out yourself. I'm not going to read through every single one or we would be here forever. So I will link them below so you can go do your own due diligence and check it out. Now, in those two accounts of his birth, neither one, okay, states the exact date or month in which he was born. Neither one. Which I find interesting. If you actually look at the Old Testament, every single feast, God sets up his own calendar, right? He says, on this new moon, and this is this month, and this is that month, and there's this many days, and blah, blah, blah. He goes into specific detail about his calendar and how he wants it set up, right? And then he says, here's some celebrations that I want you to celebrate, things I want you to do. And I want you to do it exactly this way, exactly on this day, starting this time in the evening and going till the next day or 7 days later. He is so specific on the things he wants us to celebrate. So specific, down to the hour kind of specific in some cases, right? And for a God who is so specific on the things he wants us to celebrate, I find it very interesting that he made sure that the date of Jesus' birth was not recorded in the Bible anywhere. kind of gives you a big hint that it wasn't something that was meant to be, you know, like annually celebrated. Now, I'm sure, of course, that people in biblical times, of course, did, you know, at least account the fact that, oh, I'm another year older, right? But there's no biblical basis anywhere for the celebration of a birthday, okay? And Jesus, we do have some contextual clues as to what time of year he was born, okay? And those contextual clues do not indicate that it would be in December in the middle of winter, all right? The shepherds were out with their flocks at night. They wouldn't be doing that in the middle of winter. That was usually they would be doing that in the spring sort of a thing, because, you know, the flocks are, you know, having babies in the spring. So usually the flocks would be out and some of the shepherds would be out in the springtime at night, not in the middle of the coldest, darkest time of the year. So he was probably born in the spring. And also in here it says that Herod, right, or they were supposed to travel to their hometowns to be counted, right? Okay. So I think it would be very unwise, probably, right, for the ruler of the time to make people travel in the dead of winter, in the darkest time of the year, right? Like the darkest night is sometime around like December 22nd or 23rd usually. And it's really cold. I don't think he would be trying to send all of his people out to travel by donkey or by cart or by horse that time of year. You know what I mean? Now, the reason we have decided, I guess, that, oh, it's going to be in December, even though that's not accurate, is 300 and some odd years, give or take, after Jesus rose again, right? Pretty sure it was Constantine. You can go double check me. I might be wrong about the name. Again, I'm giving little factoids of all the things that I remember when I was looking up all this stuff myself. You can go double check, and I encourage you to do your due diligence. He decided to coincide, shall we say, like a little bit of Christianity with a giant pagan holiday of Saturnalia, which is the celebration of the birth of the sun god Sun, okay? And that it happens in December. So he tried to like take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, sprinkle a little Christianity onto a giant pagan holiday. But up until then, like those 300 and some odd years after Jesus rose, nobody celebrated Christmas. Like, it wasn't a thing. Nobody celebrated the anniversary of Jesus' birth. It wasn't a thing. Right? And for something that wasn't a thing for so many years, like, if God wanted it to be celebrated, he would have put it in the Bible. Hey, you are to do this at this specific time and celebrate it this specific way. But he doesn't. So this holiday in and of itself is not from God, okay? It's not something that God said to do. It's not something that God really is in, to be quite frank, because it's a pagan holiday, and a lot of the traditions and practices and all the things we do surrounding it are mostly all pagan. And God doesn't do pagan stuff, right? That's not of him. He has specific feasts that he tells us to celebrate, and this isn't it. When it comes to the traditions that we surround this with, okay, we do things like setting up a Christmas tree, which has nothing to do with God or Jesus. You may slap a star on top of that tree to represent the star that's in the story of Jesus' birth. That's probably about as close as that Christmas tree is going to come to actually having anything to do with Jesus. Christmas trees Actually, there was an old pagan thing that they used to do. I'm pretty sure it was somewhere around Scandinavian area. They would take a tree, drag it through the forest, set it up in their camp, decorate it, and then light it on fire and dance around it and drunken revelries and have orgies and things around it until it was burnt to an ash. And then we took that pagan practice and are like, oh sure, well, we'll just slap a Christian label on it. It's not Christian at all. There is a verse in the Old Testament, pretty sure it's in Deuteronomy somewhere. A lot of people take this and translate this to saying that, to going against Christmas trees. I mean, it's specifically talking about making yourself an idol, right? So it's talking about the pagan practice of taking a tree, hewing it out, you know, decking it out with gold and silver and stuff like that, and then like bowing down and worshiping it, more or less. I'll have to link that scripture, look it up and link it below. But that specifically is talking about idols. But if you read it in its context, it could apply to Christmas trees too, just the way that it sounds, you know what I mean? Like, it has nothing to do with anything God states as biblical. We'll state that. Mistletoe. Let's just say the pagan practice was to do way more than just a little smooch underneath it. That, again, has nothing to do with God. Christmas garlands, wreaths, all of that have nothing to do with God, right? A lot of our, like, the gift giving and stuff like that, you know, like, people do give gifts, you know, generally and randomly and for different occasions, but that, like, people try and attribute that back to the wise men giving gifts, except the wise men were not there the night Jesus was born. If you actually look at the story, they didn't show up till later, like after he was already born. So it wasn't actually on the date of Jesus' birth that they gave him gifts, number one. And number two, they gave those gifts to God's son. They didn't give the gifts to each other while looking at God or saying, hey, yeah, Jesus, this is about you, but we're giving gifts to each other. Like, that's the whole thing. I think the thing with a lot of these traditions too is all of these decorations and all these things that we do, they're not, like I said, they're not really Christian, right? They have nothing to do with God or the Bible. And so a lot of people who are not Christian do celebrate this holiday. And as Christians, we're supposed to be, like, set apart from the world, right? But if you actually go into a Christian home, right, and then go into, like, any secular atheist home who's celebrating Christmas or whoever else is celebrating Christmas, if you go and you just look at their homes based on the decorations they have up, I think a lot of people would be hard-pressed to tell which home is the Christian home and which home isn't. Because a lot of Christian homes have Santa Claus in them. A lot of Christian homes are decorated with all of the pagan-type things. And like I said in the other video, Santa is a whole nother problem to do with Christmas, and it's so against Christianity. It's got problems. But the only thing that you might be able to tell the difference, okay, if you walked into a Christian home versus a not Christian home, maybe, is if they have a nativity scene set up. Okay? And the nativity scenes in and of themselves, whilst, you know, seeming innocent and fun and cute and harmless, are in a way representative of, you know, like the old school idolatry. And God said not to make any images of him, and yet we feel the need to have an image of baby Jesus hanging around. God said not to make any images, any graven images especially, so like carved out images, which is what the nativity sets usually are, carved out of plastic or wood or fill in the blank of material here. But these nativity scenes, besides being set up as idols, which God says not to do, besides being an image of God, which God also says not to do, they're also usually inaccurate. Like, they'll have Mary, Joseph, Jesus, the animals, the stable, right? All that's accurate. They might have the shepherds, which is accurate too. But every single nativity scene I've seen has the wise men there. The wise men were not there the night that Jesus was born. They didn't show up until after the fact. Like, if you actually go into the account of Matthew, it talks about how they went to Herod, right? It's in chapter 2 of Matthew. You can go look it up. I'm not going to read the whole thing, because of course we'd be here forever. But they go and they ask him, where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him. So in other words, he's already born. Where is he? You should know where he is, because you rule this place, and you should know the prophecies. You should know where he is. Can you point us in the right direction? They were not there the night he was born. Further evidence in this chapter, if you go down to verse 8. And he sent them to Bethlehem, so Herod, right, sent the wise men to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search diligently for the young child. And when you have found him, bring me word again that I may come and worship him also," right? And then they end up going into the house where Mary was at. So they're not in the stable anymore when they do find him, which, again, is just another inaccuracy. And I would think, if we're going to celebrate a holiday, or if we're going to celebrate a holy day, right, or something about God, that we should be doing it accurately, right? And that it should ultimately glorify him. But if we're doing this inaccurately and worshiping him in a month that he was not born, and in ways that don't glorify him but glorify the pagan practices that came before us, and doing this all in an inaccurate way, like, I don't really think God gets the glory out of that. Not to mention, of course, the fact that we've laid Santa Claus into this, the elf on the shelf stuff, a giant bubble of consumerism, excessive consumerism. Like, we've put so much stuff into this that none of it is really godly. None of it has anything to do with him. I mean, Jesus, if anything, even in homes that I've seen of Christians who are like higher up in the church or even pastors, Jesus is like a little footnote on Christmas in a lot of these homes, which is kind of sad. Number one, I mean, if you're going to go ahead and celebrate some sort of secular holiday, then celebrate it as a secular holiday, but be honest about it and be like, yeah, I'm celebrating something that's not about God, right? Now, there are, of course, a lot of people who just grew up celebrating Christmas, or you grew up with the traditions. You were just told that, yeah, this is Jesus's birthday, we celebrate this every year, blah, 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 and so you don't really know the history behind it, or know, kitty, don't move my computer, or don't really know, like, all of the little intricacies, but because you haven't actually read the story yourself, there's a lot of people who fall into that category and just celebrate it out of ignorance and just, this is what we've always done, which, again, God knows your heart, and ultimately, though, when he does open your eyes to what this holiday really is and how it doesn't really glorify him at all and it's not really about him, that's when it's like, okay, well, now I have the knowledge and now I have to go back to God, and to be right with God, right, I have to go ask him what he thinks about this. I have to go confirm things with him and double check with him and see what he wants me to do about it. Whether he wants you to celebrate it or not, or whether he wants you to do different things or celebrate the holy days that are in the Old Testament or not. Like, you have to take that back to God and really talk to him about it. Because ultimately, Christmas has very little to do with Jesus. Very little. It's everything that surrounds it is pagan, and God says not to do as they do, not to follow after their abominations, not to, celebrate the things they celebrate, not to learn the things that they teach you. And these are things that, again, were probably just learned generations and generations ago and have been passed on and added to through the decades, but none of these are actually biblical things. I mean, yes, Jesus was born. Thank God for that. Yes, he came and, he did all of these beautiful miracles, and then he died for all of us and rose again to save all of us so we could spend an eternity in heaven with him. These are all amazing things. But nowhere does God say to celebrate Christmas or celebrate the anniversary of Jesus' birth. God went so far as to make sure that the actual date of Jesus' birth was not put in the Bible. Right? God inspired the entire Bible, and he made sure that that specific date was not in there. And I think he did it for a reason. Ultimately, right, what we do or don't celebrate is between us and God. It says in the New Testament that we are not to judge each other on what holy days we do or don't celebrate. Some people will have every single day be the same to them, and some people will celebrate some things and some people won't. Ultimately, of course, that's between you and God, but we will have to account to God for the things that we did in our lives that did glorify him versus the things that didn't, right? And I think it's just good to have this knowledge to understand why we celebrate the things we do. It's good to know the why behind it, because then you can make an informed decision of what you want to do with it, or if you want to change your traditions or whatever else the case may be. Like I said before, I'm gonna link the scriptures down below. I pray that this has opened your eyes in some way, or given you even just a new factoid to go about your day and think about, talk to God about, whatever the case may be. I pray that you would glorify God with your life, however God leads you to do so. Okay? I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.